We're talking about our best bets for the national championship game between Purdue and UConn. And Jake, the last time these two teams played was back in 2009 when UConn knocked Purdue out of the Sweet 16. But before the year started, Purdue had the third best odds to win the championship at plus 1,200, and UConn was at sixth with plus 1,600 odds, even though they won it last season.
1,600 looking like an absolute steal right now. I guess, Vegas thought that they wouldn't be able to replace Adama Sanogo and Jordan Hawkins, their best two players from last year's championship team, but they were able to do so, and all credit goes to their head coach, Danny Hurley, looking like the new cream of the crop in college basketball. Krzyzewski's gone. Roy Williams is gone. I think Hurley is making a claim that he is the new alpha dog in college basketball head coaching. And UConn, back-to-back national championship appearances, how can you argue?
Yeah, this will be the first time you get a back-to-back champion since Florida. I think it said in 2007. But before the tournament started, the books knew. They had UConn in first with plus 500 odds. They had Purdue in second with plus 700 odds. And my point here is that we got the matchup that we were supposed to get. This was expected. You had fun stories like NC State and Clemson who snuck in, but these were the two best teams on paper, and they proved it these last few weeks. Now, I know you loved UConn because you told me before the tournament started to add them in my bracket and put them as far as I could. But did you have Purdue getting the championship when you filled yours out?
Honestly, no. I had them losing to Creighton in the Elite Eight in mine. Purdue, it was tough to trust them this season. I mean, this is a team that lost last year to a 16 seed in Farley Dickinson, who didn't even win their conference tournament. It was by far the most humiliating upset in NCAA tournament history. They had also lost to a 15 seed, a 13 seed in years past. So this is a team that has had a lot of choking in recent NCAA tournaments. While they obviously have the talent and apparently the motivation after last year's loss, I was not expecting them to make it this far.
Yeah, well, the line is sitting at 6. This is early, obviously. This is immediately after both of these games. And you've got the money line at plus 230, the total at 146.5. But Ken Pom says Purdue played the third toughest schedule in the country, and UConn's in the 25 range. Do you think that schedule that Purdue battled through makes you more confident in their ability to fight against really good teams, or does that not really matter at this point?
I don't think it matters as much at this point. We've now gone super far into the tournament. Both teams have had really, really tough competition. I mean, Alabama has the toughest schedule in all of college basketball, and we just saw what UConn did to them. So, Purdue, yes, they've been battle tested being in the Big Ten, and they did have a really, really strong out-of-conference schedule, right? They played Gonzaga, Tennessee, Xavier, Marquette. So they had played some real dogs, but UConn, they've had some real competition as well in the Big East, and I'm not really thinking that strength of schedule at this point is the determining factor.
Yeah, Ken Pom says that UConn has the fourth best defense, Purdue's at 17th. And I want to know if you think this spread's a reflection of UConn being more balanced on both sides, or do you think Purdue's D's in a similar category, even though they aren't ranked as high?
No, to me, UConn is a much better defense than Purdue. I mean, you got a guy in Stephen Castle who's a true freshman, 6'6" guard. He's been absolutely locked down this postseason in the NCAA tournament. I mean, Terrence Shannon, he had been basically the leading scorer in the country up until he had Stephen Castle going against him. Zach Edey is the premier defensive player on Purdue. And in my opinion, he just kind of stands there with his hands up. Now, granted, he's 7'4". That's all he really has to do to affect the shot. But I think that the UConn defense is much more swarming. They're much better coached. And, Purdue, they might try to be funneling guys inside to block Edey shots, but I don't think UConn is going to be so easily swayed on the offensive side.
Well, you talk about Edey. He's obviously the big name that everybody wants to talk about, but that's mostly because people don't like him. But on the other side, you've got Donovan Clingan, who's a stud, and he doesn't make much of an impact or as much of an impact as Edey does for his team. So obviously you have guys like Newton and Castle, who you just talked about. But is there a single player who you'd expect to go off for UConn, or is their style different from Purdue in that sense, since Purdue builds their team around their center?
Yeah, UConn is much more of a team than one individual player. They got Clingan, they got Newton, they got Castle, but they also got Alex Caravan, who's a great player in of his own right, a 3-and-D power forward. They got Cam Spencer, who's a sharpshooting transfer. They even got Hassan Diarra, who comes off the bench and is really active on defense, annoying people getting in the grill. So, and I think that the great news about UConn is that it can really come from any position. And because of that, they can really attack the other team's defensive weak point.
So you've got the number one offense versus the number two offense. Who matches up better and has the edge against the other team's defense?
Purdue's offensive strategy is very simple. They don't run the 3-man weave. They don't run pick and roll. They're not running the Princeton offense. They're not doing the triangle offense. No. It's very simple. back to the basket center, get him the ball on every possession. Every single possession, they're passing it around the perimeter, looking for that entry pass into Edey. Then once he gets the ball, it's like you're running a read option in football. Either the double team comes and you pass out to a wide open shooter, which has led to Purdue's number 2 3-point percentage in the entire country, even though they're in the bottom third of 3 points attempted. Or if the double doesn't come, well, now you got a 7'4" guy close to the basket with the ball. He's just going to go up and shoot it. So generally speaking, I think that when we talk about defense, you have to give a slight edge to UConn because they have one of the few centers in the country in Donovan Clingan who can attempt to match up to Edey one-on-one. He still has a slight size disadvantage, which is a very rare position for him to be in. So you never know that if he's playing in a position where he's smaller versus bigger, how he'll perform. He has never gone against anyone bigger than him in college. But I have to imagine that with his defensive skill and how well he's played so far, he'll at least be able to contain him, not necessarily stop him, but I think contain him enough that no one else has really done so this season.
That's a good point. Look at the total, 146.5. What's that tell you about how this game's going to go?
I always like to say in championship games, defense goes up, right? You know, this is the most intense game of the year. There's also nerves essentially on the offensive end, but it generally seems in championship games that defense goes up. And we've seen Purdue so far be very, very, very happy to just play half-court offense, not really push and transition, and say, hey, listen, we got Zach Edey. We got great three-point shooting. Why do we need to do anything, too extreme when we know that we have an awesome half-court offense? And while they're able to execute at a good rate, that leads to slower possessions and fewer shots in general. I think UConn is happy to play at really whatever pace, whether it be fast or slow. We see them play fast like against Alabama. We've seen them play slow, and they've got it done no matter what. So I think that Purdue is going to probably dictate the pace of the game with their slow play. UConn is likely to follow. And that's why I think even though with the 1 and 2 overall offenses in the country, we still have a relatively small over-under, and I might even lean towards the under.
Well, assuming you're going to go with UConn, because I think a lot of people we know are going with UConn, that money line at plus 260 for Purdue, plus 230. You think there's value on that, or is this a spread play if you're a Purdue bettor?
I think if you're a Purdue bettor, you definitely want to put more on the spread than the money line. But, UConn only has 3 outright losses on the year, and 2 of the 3 were by double digits. So for the most part, even when they win, it's by more than 6 points. Their average margin of victory has just been absolutely insane over the course of the season in general, but especially in the NCAA tournament. So I think that you probably want to put a little bit more on the spread than money line just for kind of like unit gambling's sake, being responsible with your bankroll and all that. But if you like Purdue, I certainly think the money line's got value. Yeah.
And if you do like Purdue or UConn, you can bet this game on BroThrow. You can bet any game, but this game specifically that we're talking about is on there right now. Plus 100 odds on the spread, plus 100 odds on the total, which means if you bet 50, you'll win 50. There is no vig. It's the best odds you'll find anywhere on the internet. You sign up for free in the link below in the description. It's brothrow.com/YouTube. That's where Jake and I make all of our bets, and you can sign up from any state in the US. But now, Jake, I want to get your final prediction because I'm assuming you're going to tell me UConn. But you got to talk me into it. I'm going to be honest with you. We watched that Iowa game yesterday. They played UConn, and UConn ended up covering. If the whole world takes one side, I'm inclined to take the other. Is this a spot where you think UConn is going to be a heavy public bet? Do you think it's going to be more balanced because there is some faith in Purdue? How is this one going to go, and why should I lay the points?
Yeah, I do like UConn. I don't think it was too hard to suss that out. I think it's really because of their defense. You got Castle, who in my opinion is the best perimeter defender in the country. And if him on Braden Smith, it's going to be much more difficult for Purdue to get the ball inside to Edey. They're going to have to work that much harder just to set up that interior pass. Not to mention that now you have Clingan on the inside, who is probably the best defensive center Edey's had to go against. I think that UConn's just too deep. They're too strong. They're too well coached. They want it too much. And that's the thing. Even though they won the championship, they still want it. They're still hungry. And that's all due to coaching. I think that Hurley is just too good of a coach. I have to ride with UConn here. Doesn't matter to me if it's public or not. It's the play. I got to go UConn. They've been too good. They've been too dominant. Every single game, not only in this tournament, but last year's tournament has been a beatdown. This is like Alabama with Nick Saban 10 years ago. Why would you want to get out in front of them? I'm sticking with UConn.
Okay, let's talk hypothetical. How many points would you need to take Purdue?
9.
It could get there. If 90% of the public's on UConn, it could shift up that way.
It could. I don't think it'll go that far.
All right, well, I'm going to follow you on UConn. I had UConn in this bracket this year. I had them in my bracket last year. I rode them in the last, 4 or 5 games last year, and I've been riding them the entire way this season. So I feel good about them. And a team I can count on to actually win me money, because you never know with some of these others. But Jake, thank you for the picks. It's been a great basketball season. We made a lot of videos throughout March Madness, and yeah, we were pretty successful. I think we had some good days.
Definitely been a strong March Madness. We'll get right back to it. Stay tuned. More BroThrow videos coming all summer long.